Hello everyone, DMFF here once again, and today we're going to be doing another top 10 video. This time for my 400 subscriber special, which I know isn't a big deal to most bigger creators out there, but it is a big deal to me, and I want to thank all of you out there. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be this far, and I wouldn't have this channel. But, actually, for our 500 subscriber special, which is coming up quickly it seems, as it just feels like yesterday that, the 300 subscriber special happened, but I digress. For the 500 subscriber special, I would like to do something completely different, something truly special. If there's anything that you would like to see, let me know down in the comment section below. But beyond that, this is going to be the top 10 my most favorite Game Boy games of all time. Yes, the old Nintendo Game Boy that came out in 1989. The same year that I was born. I'm as old as the Game Boy. Well, we already knew I was an ancient pile of dirt, but the Game Boy is actually a fantastic console that, although it did come out with many games that had, like quick on-the-go gameplay, which, there are some great ones for that, there was also some really immersive, sprawling worlds of games on the Game Boy, and a lot of those have made the list as well. Let me know what your favorite Game Boy game is down in the comment section below, and we can talk about it some. But anyway, on to my top 10 favorite Game Boy games. Let me know if any of these are on your list. Without further ado, here we go. Let's get things started with number 10. Tetris. Tetris is a puzzle video game that released in 1989 and was published by Nintendo for the Game Boy. It is a portable version of Alexei Pajitnov's original Tetris, and it was bundled with the North American and European releases of the Game Boy. So this was a launch title. This was also the first Game Boy game to be compatible with the link cable, a pack-in accessory that allows two Game Boy consoles to link for multiplayer purposes. The Game Boy version of Tetris plays identically to other versions of Tetris on other platforms. A pseudo-random sequence of tetromino shapes, composed of 4 square blocks each, fall down onto the playing field, which is 10 blocks wide by 18 blocks high. The objective of the game is to manipulate the tetrominos by moving them side to side and rotating them by 90 degrees, with the aim of creating a horizontal line without any gap. When one or more such lines are created, they disappear, and the blocks above, if any, move down by the number of lines created. The goal is to keep gaining score, while making sure that all the tetrominos do not fill up the entirety of the screen. This is a very addictive puzzle game that was not just enjoyed by children, but many people, adults alike. For 1989, this was truly a successful game, and I believe it is partially why the Game Boy was so successful. Coming in at number 9 is Kirby's Dream Land, which was an action platform game created in 1992 and developed by HAL Laboratory, published by Nintendo for the Game Boy. It is actually the first game in the entire Kirby series, and marks Kirby's debut. It introduced many conventions that would appear later in the games. The game follows Kirby as he goes through 5 levels to retrieve the sparkling stars and food of Dreamland from King Dedede. Kirby's Dream Land was designed by Masahiro Sakurai in his debut game, who intended it to be a simple game that could be easy to pick up and play by those unfamiliar with action games. For more advanced players, he offered additional optional challenges, such as a hard mode and the ability to edit Kirby's maximum HP and starting number of lives. Kirby's Dream Land was later re-released on the Nintendo DS via the Virtual Console sometime in 2011, and is also one of the games included in the compilation game Kirby's Dream Collection for the Wii, released to celebrate the series' 20th anniversary. Like stated before, Kirby's Dream Land is a side-scrolling action platformer. Like many other platformers of the 8-bit and 16-bit era, levels are played on a two-dimensional plane in which the protagonist, Kirby in this instance, has 6 health and can move left or right, as well as jump and float, in this case. Kirby's main method of attack is to inhale enemies or objects and spit them back at his enemies. As mentioned earlier, Kirby has the ability to float by jumping and pressing the jump button an additional time. You can float and flap about indefinitely, but Kirby's only method of attack is to release a puff of air held in his mouth, which allows him to fly. When you exhale this puff of air, it cancels the flight. Unlike the copy abilities of later games, Kirby's Dream Land has a more traditional power-up system that offer Kirby temporary abilities when he picks them up, although they're not a huge part of the gameplay. These often appear in the form of food, such as spicy curry, that gives Kirby fire breath, or a mint leaf, which is a sweet potato in the Japanese version, that lets Kirby fire air puffs rapidly without losing flight. At the end of each level is a boss that Kirby must fight to obtain one of the sparkling stars. So overall, Kirby's Dream Land is a quite simple game, albeit very fun, and was something that audiences of all ages could pick up and play and enjoy. While it wasn't particularly a super difficult game, there were some things in the game that were challenging, and if you gave yourself challenges on top of it, the game could be made into a more difficult game. I personally enjoy playing this with limited health and try not to get hit at all. When I was a child, I didn't do things such as this, but nowadays, when I find myself playing the game again, I try to impose as many limitations on myself to make this easy game a more challenging experience for myself. Number 8, funnily enough, is Kirby's Dream Land 2 for the Game Boy, which is a 1995 action platforming game developed by HAL Laboratory and published by Nintendo for the Game Boy handheld video game console once again. It was released on May 1st of 1995 in North America. Kirby's Dream Land 2 continues the adventures of Kirby from Kirby's Dream Land and Kirby's Adventure, adding 3 animal friends to aid Kirby in battle. It can be played on the Super Game Boy and gives slight changes to the game, such as adding a custom color scheme, a special game border, and a few more sounds. In this iteration of Kirby, most of his mechanics remain intact, including some new ones such as swimming, and the ability that Kirby is well known for, copying abilities of enemies, such as Ice Breath or the ability to turn into stone, which will be a mainstay in the series going forward. This time in the game, you are still fighting King Dedede, but this time he is possessed by an evil force called Dark Matter, whom you must defeat, using your new animal friends, Rick the Hamster, Kind the Fish, and Pooh the Owl. Adding the copy abilities and these animal friends to the game made the game a whole lot more fun for me in particular, as I personally do enjoy the copy abilities in Kirby, and I think that is a core piece of his identity. Thus, I do enjoy Kirby games that has the copy ability in it. Plus, the new animal friends were a lot of fun and added variety to the gameplay. All of these reasons are why I put this game ahead of Kirby's Dream Land 1, and I think it is a more preferable game to play. A lot of fun, and the graphics actually look quite nice on this game. Coming in at lucky number 7 is Metroid 2: Return of Samus. which is a 1991 action-adventure game developed and published by Nintendo for the Game Boy. This was the first Metroid game for a handheld console, and it was released in North America in November of 1991. The game follows bounty hunter Samus Aran and her mission to eradicate the Metroids from their home planet, SR-388, before the space pirates can obtain them. Players must find and exterminate the Metroids to progress in this game. Like the original Metroid, which was released in 1986 for the NES, Metroid 2 was developed by Nintendo Research and Development 1. Samus finds herself on the fictional planet SR-388. Players advance through the game by using Samus's weapons and abilities to kill a fixed number of Metroid creatures, which will show at the bottom right hand of the screen, for a total of 47 Metroids. Since we are on the Metroid's home planet, Metroids kind of take a little bit of a metamorphosis on this planet and evolve into their most powerful stages. The Metroid creatures are encountered in different evolution stages of their development cycle. The original form, Alpha, Gamma, Zeta, and Omega. The more developed the organism, the stronger their attack is. The game also features two weapons that are brand new to the Metroid series: the Tri-Splitting Spazer Laser Beam and the Plasma Beam, which passes through enemies when shot. Samus can only equip one beam at a time, but she can switch between them by returning to where they are first found. Metroid 2 also features the Space Jump, a new suit enhancement that allows Samus to jump infinitely and access otherwise unreachable areas. Returning is Samus's Morph Ball mode, but in addition to this, she has additional modes to add onto her Morph Ball, featuring the Spider Ball and the Spring Ball. The Spider Ball allows Samus to cling to most walls and gives her freedom to explore both surfaces and ceilings of caverns. The Spring Ball gives Samus the ability to jump while she is in the Morph Ball form. This game is incredibly linear, and a lot of times can be kind of frustrating because a lot of the things look kind of samey, but all in all, it is a blast to explore SR-88 and try to find all of the secrets and all of the Metroids that you must destroy. This all culminates into a final showdown with the last Metroid on the planet. And I'm not going to spoil anything for you. If you would like, you can look up videos on it, or my recommendation is play through the Metroid series as a whole on your own, because the Metroid series is awesome and definitely does not get the love that it deserves. While this game is a bit of a black sheep of the family of Metroid games, I still think it is quite the enjoyable experience. Though it can be a bit frustrating and is a little bit slow, I still think it is worth giving a play at least once. Number 6, funnily enough, is Super Mario Land 2, 6 Golden Coin, which is a 1992 platforming game developed and published by Nintendo for the Game Boy. It is the sequel to Super Mario Land, one of the very first games that came out on the console, and is also a pretty decent game, but you can tell that many improvements have been made in this game over the previous game in the series. As with many Mario games, you assume the role of protagonist Mario, whose main objective is to reclaim his personal island and castle, Mario Land, from the clutches of his greedy rival, Wario. The gameplay builds and expands on that of its precursor with innovations carried over from Super Mario World. In the game, you find yourself going to 6 different lands to obtain the 6 golden coins in order to unlock the door to your castle. So that way you can go in, fight Wario, kick him out, and reclaim ownership of the land that is yours. Using power-ups such as Fire Mario and the newly released Funny Mario that allows you to float with your ears There are 32 total levels of non-stop fun. This game is quite short and can be beaten in an afternoon, as it was made for the Game Boy to be played in small sessions while on the go. This game is a ton of fun and, in my opinion, is the best Mario-like game on the console that plays like Super Mario games. Though, there is another action platformer that isn't quite the same as a Mario game, but very close, that I believe is better than this game. And we'll get onto that now. Number 5. Wario Land. Super Mario Land 3. Technically the third game in the Super Mario Land series, Wario Land is a 1994 platform game developed and published by Nintendo for the Game Boy. It is the first installment of the Wario series and is a sequel to 1992's Super Mario Land 2. The story follows Wario traveling to a distant island to steal and sell a valuable statue, purchase his own castle out of envy of Mario's, whom he attempted to steal in the previous game. The player traverses themed zones consisting of levels, each of which scattered with collectible coins and treasures to amass wealth for the end stages of the game. The goal of this game is to go throughout every single stage, defeat it, collect as many coins as possible, get all the treasures that you possibly can, and defeat any bosses along the way. If you were able to collect all of the treasures by the end of the game, then something special might happen. Wario Land's gameplay is markedly different from the previous two games in the Super Mario Land series and the Mario series as a whole. The game takes place on a route through several themed areas, which is split into several courses, culminating in a boss at the end of each themed area. Wario is able to jump on or charge into enemies to knock them over. Enemies are then stunned, can be picked up, and thrown at other enemies to kill them. When in his grown form, Wario is able to perform a shoulder charge, which is used to attack enemies, break through block, and open hidden treasure chests. There are additionally 3 unique helmets that act as power-ups for Wario, with their own abilities. The Bull helmet increases Wario's strength, doubles the length of his shoulder charge, and allows him to cling to ceilings, performing a butt stomp on the ground as well, which stuns nearby enemies and breaks through blocks underneath him. The Jet helmet increases Wario's running speed and lets him fly in purely horizontal directions in the air, as well as do shoulder charges underwater. Finally, the Dragon helmet lets Wario shoot long-range bursts of flame, both on land and underwater, which destroy enemies and blocks on contact. This attack does replace his regular shoulder charge, so as long as he wears that Dragon helmet, you cannot shoulder charge, so keep that in mind. The Starman does make a reappearance in this game to gain temporary invincibility as well. Overall, I feel that the difference in gameplay for Wario Land over the Mario game actually adds a layer of fun that isn't found in some of the Mario games. The non-linear nature of this game as well adds to the fun, as you can defeat things in almost any order you would like. I highly recommend this game, and I find it to be the best platformer on the console. I highly recommend that you give this one a try. Number 4. The Final Fantasy Legend, or also known as in Japan, Makai Toshi Saga. The Final Fantasy Legend, originally released in Japan as Makai Toshi Saga, and is a role-playing video game developed and published by Square for the Game Boy. It was released in North America in September of 1990 and is the first game in the Saga series, and the first role-playing video game for the Game Boy. Square translated the game into English for worldwide release and renamed it to the Final Fantasy Legend, linking it with the Final Fantasy series to improve marketing, which worked for me. The Final Fantasy Legend was conceived by Nobuyuki Hoshino and was developed under director Akitoshi Kawaza. Renowned composer Nobu Uematsu wrote the score for this game. This game also happened to be Square's first million seller with 1.37 million units shipped. Though released to mixed reception, it has since been described as one of the Game Boy game's best games, and cited as an influence for series such as Pokémon. As stated, Final Fantasy Legend is a turn-based RPG. The player navigates a character throughout the game world with a party of up to 4 characters, which include humans, mutants, and monsters. Humans and mutants both come in 2 genders of male and female and have slight stat variations. Humans are the most expensive to upgrade, as they have 8 slots that they can equip items, weapons, and armor, but can only increase their stats by purchasing items. Mutants, on the other hand, can use magic and have high magic stats, but level up a random stat point at the end of each battle, very similar to Final Fantasy II, where monsters are like static beings that can only upgrade themselves by eating meat of other monsters. Most of the game happens within towns, castles, caves, and similar areas. The player is initially limited to the world of the continent to explore, and given access to later worlds as their party climbs the tower at the center of the world. Players can save their game anytime and anywhere when not in combat to save a slot for later play. Just like with the Final Fantasy series, random encounters do initiate combat, which changes to a battle screen. But instead of a side-by-side comparison, you are seeing the monsters straight on as if you are in a POV view. Each battle uses a menu-driven, turn-based system. At the beginning of each turn, the player selects whether to fight or attempt to run. If the fight option is selected, the player selects an option for each party member from his or her equipment or skills to attack, defend, use magic, or equipped items. Once the player has chosen actions, it will go throughout the combat and read you a text telling you what order everything happens in based on agility. Winning battles may award the player money, GP, and items. Occasionally, enemy monsters will drop meat, which can be consumed by the monster classes to increase or sometimes decrease their stats. Another different feature in this game is that each character will have multiple hearts, as well as their normal health. If a character dies, one of those hearts depletes, and if a character has all hearts depleted and is dead, that character is permanently dead. Except for the initial character that you choose. You will have to find a regular heart to refill that character's heart, and then you will be able to revive them. This game is actually one of my favorite RPGs of all time, and it just so happened that I played this game around the time that Yu Yu Hakusho was releasing in North America, and at the time there was an arc in Yu Yu Hakusho called the Saint Beast arc, which happens within A's Tower, which holds a few parallels to this game. Not only that, the 4 Saint Beasts that Yusuke and crew have to fight are all the names of the 4 main bosses of this game: Genbu, Shenryu, Byakko, and Suzaku. There are a couple of other bosses in this game toward the end of the game, but I will not spoil that, and I highly recommend that you give this game a try. My only complaint for this game is that the encounter rate is pretty high, but that is because it is on a Game Boy system, and, you know, you are only supposed to play this for small amounts of time while you're on the go. I absolutely love this game, and it is very well deserving of its 4th place spot. Number 3. Pokemon Yellow version, Special Pikachu Edition. Often referred to as Pokemon Yellow, this is an enhanced version of Pokemon Red and Blue released for the Game Boy. Though this game was released on the Game Boy, it does have support by the Game Boy Color. As many people know, the player controls the protagonist from an overhead perspective and navigates the fictional region of Kanto in a quest to master Pokemon. The goal is to become the champion of the Indigo League by defeating the 8 gym leaders and the Elite Four, as well as the champion. Another objective is to complete the entire Pokédex, an in-game encyclopedia, by obtaining all 150 or 151 Pokemon. In order to do so, many players had to use a Game Link cable which connects 2 Game Boy systems and allows Pokemon to be traded or battled between games. Pokemon is a very well-known role-playing video game, and this one is no different. It was released in October of 1999 in North America. This game, just like its predecessors, was very well received. I personally enjoyed Pokemon Yellow over Pokemon Red and Blue for the updated sprite work and the color edition being able to be used on both a Game Boy Color and Super Game Boy. The fact that Pikachu is your starter as well, and follows you around, and if you talk to Pikachu, it makes some ear-screeching, bleeding sounds, just really stuck with me, and has remained my favorite of the 3 initial Pokemon games that came out for the Game Boy. There's just a super awesome charm to this game that, even replaying it in more modern times, has me really enjoying it all over again. I know this time I have been playing a essentially like remake ROM hack of the game called Pokemon Yellow Legacy, which is fantastic and I highly recommend you check it out. Smith Plays Pokemon is incredible for making such an awesome game. But I replayed just vanilla Pokemon Yellow last year and had an absolute blast. I even used my team from Pokemon Yellow to play Pokemon Stadium, which is another one of my favorite games on the N64. But yes, I highly enjoy Pokemon, and just about every Pokemon game that has come out has become a game that I love to look back on fondly, or has been a game that I have played competitively in. But this here is toward the beginning of the multi-million-dollar industry that is Pokemon. If you haven't played it, I highly recommend playing Pokemon Yellow Legacy, that ROM hack that Smith Plays Pokemon made, as it makes it the definitive way to play the game nowadays. Number 2. The Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening. Link's Awakening was a game that released in August of 1993 in North America. It is an action-adventure game developed and published by Nintendo for the Game Boy. It is the first installment of the Legend of Zelda series to be released on a handheld. Link's Awakening is one of the few Zelda games to not take place in the land of Hyrule, and doesn't feature Princess Zelda, Ganon, or any of the normal tropes of Zelda games. Instead, the protagonist Link begins the game stranded on Koholint Island, a place guarded by a whale-like deity called the Windfish. The player fights monsters and solves puzzles while searching for 8 musical instruments that will awaken the sleeping Windfish and allow him to escape the island. While this game's development began as an effort to port the highly critically acclaimed Super Nintendo game A Link to the Past on the Game Boy, it ended up growing into an original project under the direction of Takashi Tezuka, with a story and script created by Yoshiaki Koizuma and Kensuke Tanabe. The majority of the A Link to the Past team reassembled for Link's Awakening, and they all wanted the game world to feel like a television series known as Twin Peaks. After a development period of 1.5 years, Link's Awakening released to critically and commercial success. This game felt like a fully fledged Legend of Zelda title on the Game Boy, because it was. The gameplay is some of my favorite gameplay in all of the Zelda series, and is a very strange and whimsical feeling world, because it was designed that way on purpose. Though I do prefer Link's Awakening DX for the Game Boy Color, the original version that came out was on the original Game Boy. The only main differences was being able to play this game in color and having a color dungeon in the Game Boy Color Deluxe release. This game was so good that it ended up being remade on the Switch, and I do enjoy the Switch version, but I think I like the original on Game Boy and Game Boy Color the best. They just feel better to control, and I like the simplicity of the graphics quite a bit. Easily one of my favorite games for the console, and easily a game that I have hundreds, if not thousands, of hours put into from the time span of being a kid to now, because I do go back and replay it from time to time. Soon, sometime in the near future, I will be playing a 3-heart challenge of this game in its DX form. Though this is one of my favorites on the console, there is one more that trumps this game in my opinion, and that game is number 1. Pokemon Gold and Pokemon Silver version. These Pokemon games were released in North America in October of 2000 and were role-playing games similar to its predecessors, developed by Game Freak and published by Nintendo for the Game Boy, with functionality added for the Game Boy Color. Just like before in the previous Pokemon games, the goal of this game is to become the champion battler of Pokemon, and to collect all of the Pokemon, which there are, I believe, 250 in this one. Actually, it was 251, adding 100 brand new Pokemon to this game to capture and battle with. Though this might feel pretty similar to the originals, where you just travel to 8 gyms and complete your Pokedex and become the master of Pokemon battling, this game is slightly different, as it has a total of 16 gyms, where you can travel between the Johto region, where you start out in this game, and can travel over to the Kanto region and defeat their gyms, to culminate in an ultimate endgame where you battle the previous champion on Mount Silver, a treacherous mountain filled with powerful Pokemon and rugged terrain. I also really like the design of the areas in Johto in this game. It feels like a mix of traditional and modern Japan all combined into one world. It is really a blast to explore all of the things within this game. The berry system that was added in this game by finding berries on trees was intriguing. Headbutting trees, hidden power being a randomized move that could be any type and could deal almost any amount of damage. Just all the different additions, shiny Pokemon. This game really fleshed out Pokemon, and in my opinion is probably my favorite Pokemon games released on the Game Boy that can be played on original Game Boy hardware. Pokemon Crystal, which I do enjoy better than these two games, as it is essentially an upgraded version of Gold and Silver, unfortunately only can be played on the Game Boy Color, so it is omitted from this list. However, it very well may be found on the Game Boy Color list, so look out for that one. Additionally, 2 brand new Pokemon types were added to the game, the Steel type and Dark type, which helped balance the typing and made it so then Psychic type Pokemon were just not the end-all be-all type. Additionally, again, the introduction of Pokemon breeding appeared in this game, which meant that you could bring two Pokemon of the same egg group, but differing genders, to the Pokemon daycare, and they would create an egg, which you could hatch into a baby. This baby Pokemon will inherit the species of its mother and the moves from its father. However, legendary, mythical, and other species of Pokemon, specifically ones without gender, cannot breed, except Ditto can breed with all but the Pokemon with the no eggs discovered group, like the legendary and mythical Pokemon. The plot of this game is also improved upon from the previous game. The villainous group, Team Rocket, returns, and you must defeat them just like in the previous game, but things are a little bit more complicated this time around. In all honesty, the second generation of Pokemon is my second favorite generation of Pokemon. My first being, and this is going to be very controversial, because, you know, Pokemon came out when I was a kid, and many people would expect my favorite generation to be Gen 1 or Gen 2, but my favorite generation is Gen 5. It's where I feel like Pokemon peaked. It's the most solid designed. It is the least buggy of the generations, in my opinion. But this video is not about those games. Instead, here is Pokemon Gold and Silver, my favorite games for the original Game Boy. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's video, my top 10 favorite original Game Boy games of all time. What are some of your favorite Game Boy games? Did I leave off any of your favorites? Let me know down in the comments section below, and let me know if you have any good, like, childhood stories that really formed memories in your mind about some of your favorite games from the Game Boy. Again, thank you all so much for tuning in and being a part of this community. I couldn't have done any of this without any of you, and I just want you all to know that I appreciate every last one of you. I hope you all have a wonderful day. I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.